The eternal poet writes on the cosmos the great poem of creation, and garlands himself with the laurel of uns and stars. At rest upon the lake Manasarowar, he gazes on the golden lotus. And, as he looks, from its petals rises Lakshmi, the world's desire, resplendent in loveliness. But the earth and the other stars weary, in their endless round of law. The cry rises for the great God to awake, to destroy these old bodies, till one at new may come. He awakes, Shiva comes, mightily weaponed, and shaking the worlds. Again, the primal fires are kindled, and creation dissolves in flame, broken suns and moons, crumbled stars and planets, shower like flakes of darkness down. All ends as it began, shriveling to destruction. The great God closes his eyes, and returns to his meditation. A handful of translations, 5 from Victor Hugo, a long passage from Shelley, were printed with morning songs. Emergence found other than lyrical expression. He was feeling in many directions after less subjective mediums. Now, as always, he was writing prose as well as verse. Various topics are essays. 46 Rabindranath Tagore, not on any definite subject or plan, but in the spirit that boys catch butterflies. When spring comes within, many colored fancies are born and new about in the mind. At wrote The Young Queen's Markle, a novel. He calls this his first, as he does not acknowledge the earlier pity. Some liked it, he said of The Young Queen's Market, but it is very crude. I would expunge it, if I were free. Other essays, discussions, show his efficiency as a journalist and contain suggestive literary criticism. Morning songs were written in Calcutta. He was living in Sutter Street, now a dull section of the European quarter, but at that time more open. A pleasant sojourn at Karvar, on the western coast, followed. Here was an estuary, and vast sandy spaces, and in these surroundings he wrote Nature's Revenge, his first important drama. That he should turn to drama was inevitable. Among his many gifts, he was a great actor. Bengal knew that he could act. In India, drama is in the common life. The legends of the gods are staged, in as such as those which, autumn by autumn, hold the villages of the United Provinces spellbound. Lila drama is, from first to last, a characteristic word of his poetry. The indigenous drama, like the Athenian, is played under the open skies, in courtyards or streets. It is dying out rapidly in Bengal, but survives in villages. Jaitrajay or traveling theatrical parties combine, singing and acting. A Kavidaf, or group of poets, will have question and answer in verse, or the whole cast will perform an episode from the story of Rama or of Krishna. Especially in the autumn, these indigenous plays, so like the Old English mystery and miracle plays, visit the villages. But in Calcutta the modern theatre and still more the cinema have proved too financially rich and varied rivals for them. These conditions, as might be supposed, were particularly favorable to Rabindranath's genius. His drama is more acceptable in open courtyard than in packed theatre. My 11 is E11 CES. p. 215 Conversation. Published in English as Sannyasi, Sacrifice and Other Plays. Emergence, Dramatic Beginnings 47 More and more. In his later work, he deliberately cultivated the vernacular tradition and drew ever closer to the folk play. From this came a great merit, a deeply interpretative quality. His plays, which give the drifting pageant of an Indian mad. But his plays soon practically disappeared from the Calcutta stage. They were acted by students or in the Tagore's Jorasunko house or at Santiniketan. The Brahmo circle kept their cult alive, and the poet himself trained his boys and girls as actors and singers. His dramatic work is the vehicle of ideas, rather than the expression of action. Nature's Revenge tells how a hermit strove to cut away all bonds with the world, and so come to possession of truth, and how a girl brought him back to the world and into the bondage of human affections. The thought of this play is one of the key thoughts of all his life. The great is to be found in the small, the infinite within the bounds of form, and the eternal freedom of the soul in love. Nature took the sannyasi to the presence of the infinite, enthroned on the finite, by the pathway of the heart. I must quote his exposition further. For a poet's own account has rights over all others. On the one side the wayfarers and villagers, content with their homemade triviality and unconscious of anything beyond. And on the other the sannyasi busy casting away his all, and himself, into the self-evolved infinite of his imagination. When love bridged the gulf between the two, and the hermit and the householder met, the seeming triviality of the finite and the seeming emptiness of the infinite alike disappeared. Nature's revenge is a sketch and not a finished composition. Travelers, students, villagers drift across the stage of the hermit's contemptuous perception of them. Shakespeare's first citizen, second citizen, are full-blooded in comparison. All are shadows. And it is a shadow that watches them, looking upon the countless homes and haunts of men as ever-shifting sandhills beat by a hollow moaning sea. 8 Yet the shadow my reminiscences, p. 237. Ibid, J. Cit Seal, p. 70, 48. Rabindranath Tagore draws our wonder and pity, for through him a poet is speaking. Rabindranath's characters are reeds for the poet's brooding music, his meditations on life and death and on the many-colored joy and sorrow of our race. The poet has taken such liberties with his own text that the latter half of his translation has hardly any correspondence with the Bengali. The play, in the original, is extremely loose in construction, the scenes are ragged, with no clear beginnings or endings. Translating, Rabindranath has telescoped together with no dramatic loss whatever scenes that are not even contiguous in the Bengali. Then, there are far too many dramatis persona, shadows that duplicate each other. Thirdly, the original is a swamp of declamation. Everyone makes long speeches. Anything more improbable than the flower talk between the sannyasi and the girl can scarcely be imagined. Bengali poets inherit a mighty tradition which overshadows them, making imagination reminiscent when it should be creative. Sakuntala bidding her plants farewell has never bidden Indian drama farewell. That farewell has so haunted succeeding poets that it is often an invocation which calls in a train of sentimentalities. The best things, dramatically, in nature's revenge, are the conversations on the road, which are full of simple obvious humor. This, and the presentation of the sannyasi's inward fight, are the only respects in which Tile original surpasses the translation, which is a far more direct and effective exposition of the play's thought and teaching. The humor, however it may jade a subtle perception, is racy and natural. Almost any group of Bengali villagers can improvise the same kind at any time, and with success. The poet, in translating, has left out much of this, which is such blood as his play possesses, and other parts he has watered down, as when the sleeper whose friends jokingly carry him off, shouting the death cry as for a corpse, wakes and insists he is not dead. The English makes him say, "I am sorry to disappoint you, gentlemen, you have made a mistake. I was not dead, but fast asleep." Emergence, dramatic beginnings 49. In the original, he cries out with the locast's terror on awaking from sleep to an unfamiliar situation. He offers proof that he is alive. His wife is still wearing her bracelets. They suggest a better proof: beat him, and see if he falls. They do so, and he howls, then flees. The poet need not have supposed that Western audiences had got so far from appreciation of farce and practical joking that he must leave this out. Athenian audiences laughed when Xanthias and Iacchus were beaten to test their divinity. This kind of thing is not high-class literature. But it is the kind of thing that happens, and not the butler-like obsequiousness of "I am sorry to disappoint you, gentlemen." And the drama's serious side, the most impressive thing is the passionate beginning of the last scene: "Let my vows of sannyasi go. I break my staff and my alms bowl. This stately ship, this world, which is crossing the sea of time, let it take me up again, let me join once more the pilgrims." This is crowned high the austere finish, which leaves the brave proud soul as lonely as it began, yet beyond computation richer for a possessed companionship. Yet one feels that this is not drama, any more than what has gone before. The play began with an attitude which stood apart from humanity. It stirs into feeling, but the feeling is the poet's, it is his life-blood which floods these channels. And the play ends with philosophy touched with emotion, if you like, and even with glimmering experience, but not with life itself. For the rest, the glory of this scattered and chaotic piece is its poetry too much on the side of eloquence and rhetoric, but shot with imagination and a great suggestion of spaciousness, of the vast sublimities on which the Sunnesi's soul had fed itself. The beginning is mighty 70 lines of crowded imagery, an extraordinarily fierce soliloquy. To the poet nature must have been a very vivid reality before in the Frogs, by Aristophanes. 450 Rabindranath Tagore he could create and express such resentment of her actio one and influence. The speech's atmosphere is as bleak and cold as that of the Himalayan cave in which it is laid. A naked spirit speaks, amid a naked world of winds and icicles. Then picture masses on picture, sublimity gathers to sublimity. Later passages rise again to this lofty level of poetry. Bengalis claim that Rabindranath is one of the world's greatest poets of sorrow. The claim is not unfounded. The pathos of men's striving wasted lives, the sacrifice and loneliness of women's days, have found, since time began, few more profoundly moved spectators. For the sake of this pity, we can forget the play's weakness as drama, for this, and for its beauty. This is Indian, and is fine. The bliss of Shiva, filling the shadowless unstained eternity, I have gained. Have gained the image of that bliss. His own English version is not less beautiful, that joy is mine, which comes to Shiva when, after raons of dream, he wakes to find himself alone in the heart of the infinite annihilation. Fine, too, is this, where in my heart lay hid this tiny wrath, now flickering like a fire-tongued worm of hell? Out of what darkness springs with hissing forth? I recur, in closing, to the play's theme, a master word to the poet's mind. Nature's Revenge may be looked upon as an introduction to the whole of my future literary work, or, rather, this has been the subject on which all my writings have dwelt. The joy of attire in and the infinite within the finite. There is little inuggled of joy in this somber drama. But the lesson of the value of the finite, of this little life of days and nights, is clearly taught as he says, in an epigram of later date, my R. Reminiscences, p. 238. Chattali. Emergence, dramatic beginnings 51. Let whoso will, with shut and brooding eyes, if earth be real or mere dream surmise. Meanwhile, let me with thirsty vision drink its beauty ere my sun of life shall sink. One tea is strange, he said to me many years later, that even when young I had that idea, which was to grow with my life all along, of realizing the infinite in the finite, and not, as some of our Indian metaphysicians do, eliminating the finite. He returned from Karvar and married, in December, 1883. 6 La.st poems of youth, pictures and songs broke into this first dramatic period. The name is fitting, almost all the pieces being sketches, often carefully detailed, or lyrics. The book is the record of his sensitiveness to sights and impressions, the notebook of his spirit. A faculty of many-sidedness possessed me at this time. I spent the livelong day painting away with the many-colored fancies of my newborn youth. Again, he calls pictures and songs a sort of bridge from morning songs to sharps and flats. I was getting more concrete in my subject. Before, I was hazy and emotional and my subject uncertain. I was living in Circular Road, a very nice house. I began to observe for the first time. I used to sit at the window, and watch the hustis across our lawn, and all their activities used to delight me very much. One was no longer confined to my own feelings, but the outside world began to attract me. The pieces mark a further advance in command over form. Unhappily, his mannerisms are again intensified. He fills up whole stanzas with repetition and parallelism, and tears, laughter, flowers, light, and the rest, for they act as if under foreman. The mention of one serving as evocation of the whole troop are as tiresome as beauty and April and blood in some English Georgian verse. There are far too many flutes, the cowherd fraternity apparently existing to make distant music at eventide, and far too many lost F0 wanderers. Nevertheless, the series represents a wider range of theme and experiment than anything he had done before. My Reminiscences, p. 240. Huts. Conversation. 52 Last Poems of Youth. 53 The pictures stand out clearly, and are of many kinds. Alone shows a dusty village maiden threading her path through golden fields, against the gold sunset. A girl, alone, at the evening hour walks through the fields. On all sides of her the gold rice has ripened, on her face the evening glow has fallen, light glitters on her hair. The west is golden Golda, who has seen such gold anywhere? It is as if in the midst of this someone has painted a drab maiden. 11 I.e. Yogi is a picture that must date back to Karvar Beach, an ascetic, with matted hair and one emaciated body, walking the sands before sunrise. There is a great stillness everywhere. There is no sound in the universe except the great tune of the sea. It is as if the 5ca, with deep olam voice, were chanting the sun's praise. Dawn draws near. As if the yogi were a figure a picture, the rays of the sun have sht upward and fallen on his face, pervading the spaces behind him. Night, a dark-featured nun, meditates with closed eyes. As when the river of the immortals fell on the locks of Shiva, in a flood of star-powdered silver, so from the bounds of the eastern horizon the splendor revels on the tangled locks of Sannyasi. The Love of Rahu is the book's outstanding poem, perhaps his greatest poem so far. It basks intensity, swiftness, imagination. Rahu is a bodiless planet who swallows the moon, causing eclipses, but cannot retain his prey, the eternal hunger which is never satisfied but ever pursues. In this poem, Rahu is love that is passionate, gripped wi1h famine, a wolf that hunts down, a shadow that clings to the substance, a dark unseen self that is heard breathing when the frightened object of its love wakens at night. It is the pursuit of snake or weasel, never to be shaken off. It is like the presence of temperament, darkening thought and action. Rabindranath 54 Rabindranath Tagore never did a finer study of passion's pitiless cruelty. Such poems, few in the overshadowing bulk of other work though not inconsiderable in their actual number, are a joy amid all the flutes and flowers, the fraudulent woes and laughters. But his first youth was ending. It closed with a period of sunny happiness. These were days of utter freedom from care. Nothing in particular seemed to be anxious to express itself through my life or writings. I had not yet joined the throng of travelers on the path of life, but was a mere spectator from my roadside window. Many a person hied by on many an errand as I gazed on, and every now and then spring or autumn or the rains would enter unasked and stay with me for a while. He was doing a great deal of magazine work, among other things practically editing Balak, 11 a Bengali boy's own paper. For this he wrote The Crown, a short novel which, over 20 years later, he dramatized for the Santiniketan younger boys. This meant simply breaking it up into conversations, as it was half dramatized already. The piece is quite valueless. He wrote also a better novel, The Saint King, which later was worked up into his drama Sacrifice. I wanted a serial for Balak, and was thinking about one. I was going to visit Ramnarayan Basu. The train was crowded, and an Englishman wouldn't allow the lamp to be hidden, so it burned brightly all night and I couldn't sleep. But L dozed, and dreamed of a father and a girl before a temple. Blood was running out over the steps, and the girl was deeply pained. "Why is this blood? Why is this blood?" she kept asking, and tried to wipe it away. Her father was very troubled, and couldn't answer her, so tried to silence her, really to silence his own mind. L woke up, and determined to put this in my story. And I used also the story of the Raja of Tripura, who introduced Vaishnavism into his state, and was banished by his brother. The story was written for boys, so had a didactic element, he adds. As to its rebirth as sacrifice, it must be remembered that he is the thriftiest as well as the wealthiest of poets, and my reminiscences, pages 243-4. Boy. Conversation. L.4.st Poems of Youth 55 Attempts repeatedly that most difficult of all tasks, recension. Some of the descriptive passages in the Saint King are fine, and these are incorporated in Sacrifice in almost their original form. His acquaintance with Bankim Chatterjee ripened into friendship, and even alliance, for they wrote for the same periodicals. They crossed swords before long, in religious controversy, out of which came a long spell of estrangement, closed by a generous letter from the older man, and sealed, long after Bankim's death, by the no less generous reference of the younger, in Hebban Samriddhi. One Bengal was full of new beginnings, of business attempts such as the steamer one in which his brother Jyotirindra failed, of political and literary organizations, of propaganda. In all this the young poet bore a part. During the years when he was the Bengali Shelley, he dressed with much eccentricity and exquisiteness. I wore my hair long and indulged probably in an ultra-poetical refinement of manner. 1. We are told that he introduced among educated Bengalis the fashion of wearing long wavy hair, and what is known as the Napoleon beard. My recognized cognomen was the lisping poet, he says. Adding, my attainments were few, my knowledge of life meager, and both in my poetry and prose the sentiment exceeded the substance. 8. His apprenticeship was finishing, but one or two more books fall within it. Sh.1. RPs and Flats is a serenade from the streets in front of the dwelling of man, a plea to be allowed an entry and a place within that house of mystery. This world is sweet. One do not want to die. I wish to dwell in the ever-living life of man. There can be no question that Sharps and Flats is a richer and better book than any before it. Its variety is the more welcome, because his previous books seem to say that, whatever other merits this poet might have, he would not translate it as my reminiscences. Ibid, Loccit. My Reminiscences, p. 249. Ibid, p. 266. 56. Rabindranath Tagore have this one. Sonnets take up a large part of the book, some : of them of the ordinary Elizabethan form, others variations of the Italian one, with every conceivable arrangement of rhyme and differing length of line. One group of sonnets at once made the book a storm center. This group was defiantly heroic, sonnets on his mistress's kiss, her arms, feet, body, smile, the wind of her skirt, the sky of her heart. 2 on her breast, 1 on her nakedness. One sonnet, Bodily Union, is as frank as D.H. Lawrence. Her arms, like so much of his work, omits nothing that occurs to him, and is distressing to read. Her feet has such perverted ingenuity as it is as if the two lights of dawn and sunset have set in the shadow of her 2 feet, and it ends with the invocati 0n, come, 0 come to my heart. There the red lotus of desire, blushing with shame, is languishing. Kisses is a morass of conceits. In India, a confluence of streams is a place of pilgrimage, holy. Rabindranath naturalizes in his verse common customs of daily life, a noble gift here prostituted to leaving their homes, 2 loves have made a pilgrimage to the confluence of lips. Following this couplet comes in the law of love 2 waves have swelled, breaking, and mingling 2 lips. He is trying to prove that he is a realist, a Catholic lover of beauty, to whom nothing is common or unclean. His preoccupation with the body is literary rather than genuine, to me, at least. These sonnets read very insincerely. The Vaishnava poets had hymned this theme with endless iteration, and the amorists of the West had used the sonnet for trivial subjects till that splendid medium had become a synonym for pettiness. He, too, would keep in the tradition. This is not the whole truth, though. I add his own words. There is sensuality. Am willing to admit that there is an element which is carnal. But there I also the reaction, very strongly expressed in the later poems of the series, the trouble to escape from the same sensuality. I wanted to get rid of it completely. Just as in evening songs there is a struggle to get out of the subjective last poems of Youth 57 world of one's moods and moodiness, into the open, so in these sonnets the mind is struggling to escape from this bondage to the senses, for it kills the freedom of the mind. 1 But, he concludes, they all have a unity, all belong to the drama of life. A friend too says of these poems Rabindranath's Byronic reputation stands secure on them. In fact, to Bengali moralists the songs of Jitanjya/I are mere effusions of a sentimental temperament, because he has written these sonnets. To me he is open to criticism from quite a different side altogether. He lacks fire, he is never in it. A peculiar restraint, a lack of abandon, sometimes spoils the whole thing. He is always carried away by the imagery, the many suggestions of beauty, emotion and passion lag behind, so that he is ageways in a reminiscent mood, full of musings. In fact, his singular detachment, the characteristic going beyond the sense enjoyment, is evident everywhere. The discipline of the sonnet enriched his expression, even though he afterwards discarded a form of its own arduous fullness reverent and chose an easy-going modification, which is merely 7 rhymed couplets. For the often intolerable diffuseness of his early work, he was learning to load every rift with ore, instead of filling up interstices with quartz and rubble. He was training himself in compression. The old tropes showed a tendency to vanish, not needed where the poet had so much to say and only 14 lines in which to say it. Imagination was rising through the waves of fanciful simile and ingenious resemblance, like his own Urvaisi out of the ocean. The sonnets represent the most remarkable achievement of sharps and flats. But the book has other beautiful poems. There is a handful about childhood and children. One of these, Benediction, is translated in his crescent moon bless this little heart and is still beautiful and tender there, though grievously watered down. Folklore mingles with some poems. The rain falls pit-a-pat, the river swells, a poem whose first lines evoke the rainy evenings of his childhood, the athered clouds, the menace of thunder and lightning without, converse Dachan. Mahalanobis. 58 Rabindranath Tagore and the tales of fairyland within, is sheer charm. East and West have so borrowed each other's fairy tales that the stories the young Rabindranath heard are very like those told in Europe tales of enchanted princesses, of wicked stepmothers, of dragons. Through the poem runs the refrain of that nursery rhyme, the rain falls pit-a-pat, the river swells. But, as he says, when that rain fell, and where that river flowed, he knows not, only remain, in eternal possession, the memories those words bring back, and the glamour of unforgotten days. The 7 Kampa Brothers is another delightfully playful dancing poem, which tells of the 7 Kayampa buds and the red parul blossom, their sister, and traces their days and flights, their thoughts and experiences, as they swung on the boughs, thinking ever of their mother, compelled to serve as Cinderella by the jealous co-wife of the king, their father. That bad woman has transformed them into flowers, but they cannot forget. Night by night their sister tells them stories, but, as the last line of every stanza reminds us, thought of their mother returns, at their Peru/Sistra's tale, their mother comes in mind. A song of benediction, addressed to that inspirer of so much of his work, his niece Indira, Mrs. Prumthanath Chaudhary, is perhaps the most ambitious piece in sharps and flats. It keeps a high didactic level, from its spacious beginning, this mighty world, vast ocean girdled, swings in the deep of heaven's sea, but is much too long. The poet speaks disparagingly of the noise and clamour of the times in which he lives, and urges his friend to live the larger life of sun and star and natural forces. She is to bring in a new and finer age, she of whom he sings, and your face is heaven's light, and in your heart the break of dawn. The poet is young enough to believe that a friend who charms his own life can charm the larger world also, and last poems of Youth 59 bring in nobler thoughts and unselfishness. It reminds us of the power that Shelley ascribed to those whom he idealized, those beneath whose influence every sprite beneath the moon would repent its envy vain, and the earth grow young again. The poem's finish interests as being the first declaration that Rabindranath is aware that his verse will be immortal. His claim has not the proud confidence of or of. Not marble, or the gilded monuments of princes shall outlive this powerful rhyme, queens hereafter shall be glad to live upon the alms of thy superfluous praise. But the poet knows, and in the more modest fashion of our day tells us that he knows. There is a handful of love songs, popular everywhere, even today sung everywhere. A few can rival even music hall favorites. 9. In sharps and flats, what is perhaps his most distinctive gift and the one most prized by himself, his gift of song definitely arrived. This gift came late. For, despite the melody of his earlier pieces, that melody was clogged a 11d uncertain. But the gift, if arriving later than with most poets who have possessed it, stayed longer. Whom thou didst with tearful eyes send hence, wouldst thou now recall on what pretence? While the south wind, soft and light, roams the flowery grove this night, in the Baku/S1 shadow sitting, through thy mind his image flitting, wouldst thou him recall on what pretence? There are two more stanzas of this popular song, which was afterwards included in the play of L/Lucian. During the First World War, it became a favorite with the Bengali one Drayton, idea. Mahalanobis. Mimusops elengi, a favorite tree of Bengali poets. Its flowers are sweet-scented. 60 Rabindranath Tagore Battalion, and their camps in India and Mesopotamia resounded with it. Lastly, sharps and flats contained many translations, Shklistan equals as written in dejection, Ernest Myers's arousal, Mrs. Browning's irreparableness, I have been in the meadows all the day, Christina Rossetti's May, I cannot tell you how it was, Hood's sonnet it is not death, that some time in a sigh, Philip Marston's After, A Little Time for Laughter, Moore's Last Rose of Summer. Victor Hugo is represented by 5 pieces, Mrs. Augusta Webster by 2, and we have Swinburne, Aubrey de Vere, and a Japanese poet unnamed and translated from an English version. Myers and Mrs. Webster, he explained to me, those were the new poets at that time. I used to go to Thacker One and look for new books, I tried to get into the spirit of your new poetry. I translated what I found easy. For those who could judge, with sharps and flats a whole crowd of new things entered Indian poetry, many of them as beautiful as they were new. The greater part of the book he allowed to stand, omitting a few purely personal letter to his niece Indira and some bitter satires on the Neo-High One Dus. The play of Jailusian, a short musical drama, belongs to this period. Some of its songs are well known, and it became popular for amateur performances. Like the genius of VU1 Mickey, it has a chorus, again, but even more so, unmistakably akin to English elves. They are maids of illusion, shall we say mist maidens. They introduce the play, all illusions net we weave in endless wise. First mist maiden. Second mist maiden. Third mist, v faden. We build up dreams, filling the drowsy eyes. In the secret heart the couch of fraud we spread, with the pring breeze we fan to billowing head waves of intoxication. J.N. Calcutta Last Poems of Youth 61. These mist maidens chime in at intervals, observing in differing phrase, Lord, what fools these mortals be. The drama's plot is thin and will not be summarized here. The play of 11/Lucian kept a place in its creator's affection, for other reasons than its literary merit. He tells us that to it and the genius of Valmiki went a rapture of inspiration that he gave to no other works. The Tagore's house had always been a center of music. The poet was a famous singer among his own people, and also a famous composer. Speaking of the play of Illusion, he expressed to me a perplexity and a disappointment that went very deep with him. I have introduced some new element in our music, I know. I have composed 500 new tunes, perhaps more. This is a parallel growth to my poetry. Anyhow, I love this aspect of my activity. I get lost in my songs, and then I think that these are my best work. I get quite intoxicated. I often feel that, if all my poetry is forgotten, my songs will live with my countrymen, and have a permanent place. I have very deep delight in them. But very sadly it is nonsense to say that music is a universal language. Should like my music to find acceptance, but I know this cannot be, at least not till the West has had time to study and learn to appreciate our music. All the same, I know the artistic value of my songs. They have great beauty. Though they will not be known outside my province, and much of M work will be gradually lost, I leave them as a legacy. My own countrymen do not understand. But they will. They are real songs, songs for all seasons and occasions. In my hymns, my Brahmasangile, I ha adapted and taken wholesale older tunes from Tansen, the best of our composers. In these, I have used orthodox forms. But for my own songs I have invented very freely. Sharps and flats and the play of illusion bring us to the close of his 25th year. His first great sorrow had come to him, in the death of his older brother Jyotirindra's wife. Her companionship and sympathy had meant everything to him, and had given him what no man could have done. His references, in his reminiscences, 9 are veiled, but show how heavy the loss was. Of Akbar's court, a Hindu who became a Mussulman. p. 258. 62 Rabindranath Tagore. Or the acquaintance which I made with death at the age of 24 was a permanent one, and its blow has continued to add itself to each succeeding bereavement in an ever-lengthening chain of tears. The terrible darkness which was disclosed to me through this rent-e. And the smooth outward surface of life continued to attract me night and day as time went on. And from now onwards, the thought of death is very present in his poetry, and the constant realization of the passing nature of all we see and hear and are adds a melancholy clangor to many a passage. His reminiscences stop short at this period. Everything, his outward way of life, his environment, his attitude of mind had changed, and he was entering on his period of maturity. Book 2 11,887 to 1897 The Shailyada and Sthana period 7 Maturity Rabindranath loved solitude passionately and deeply, yet in periods, which must not be too long continued. Every spell of seclusion was followed by an energetic burst into the life of the world without. Every period of public activity by a flight to solitude. His friends learned to diagnose pretty accurately by the symptoms the imminence of a change from one course of life to the other. The change, when it came, comes with the suddenness of a flood or snow slip. But it did not come without premonition. This duality of longing showed early. Towards the end of the 80s, B made the experiment of absolute retirement to Ghazipur, in the United Provinces, famed for its roses. Here he built a bungalow. And, with a loaf of bread beneath the bough, a flask of wine, a book of verse, with his wife and manuscripts, with Sarasvati singing beside him in the wilderness, the south wind shedding the rose petals softly about him, he was going to be sheer poet, the world forgetting, by the world forgot. The sojourn was brief but very fruitful, much of Manasai being written in it. But his mind was too quick, too interested, for the experiment to last. He fled from his rose gardens as precipitately as, later, he was to flee from the tumults of his own countrymen in political revolt or from interviewers during his American tour. Mansi was published in 1891. For the first time, his poems are dated, they all fall into the years 1887 to 1890. The prevailing note of the book is quiet certainty, it marks his definite attainment of maturity. He was never to cease from experiment, in the attempt to enlarge his own range and that of his tongue. But after Manasai he was master of a 65-5-66 Rabindranath Tagore sure style. The meters owe much to English stanza forms, and he is master of the ode, as it had been written by Keats, with consummate interweaving of line and rhyme. Presently, in Chitrayi, he was to make wonderful use of the form. One difference is to be noted, Bengali admits of internal rhymes far more than English does, with far less liability to loss of dignity. But, otherwise, English mediums are adapted with fidelity and skill. Several pieces in Manasai recall India's great literary past, in deliberately Sanskritized diction, which gives a dignity such as Wordsworth's Laodamia achieves by Latinized diction. One of these, The Cloud Messenger, shows how greatly he had advanced in self-confidence. He greets Jayadeva, one dead these 7 centuries, as only one conscious that he was in the great succession of authentic poets could do, at India's eastern end El Cid today, where in our green Bengal once, on a day of heavy showers downfall, the poet Jayadeva saw, at edge of the world's rim. The emerald shadows fledge the Tamai/jungle, and the sky's skirt filled with vapors. More significant still, the poem is his first tribute to Kalidasa. As Dante looked across the centuries and hailed Virgil as master, as Spenser overlooked 200 years of poetical fumbling and claimed the succession to Chaucer, as Milton in his turn saluted his master Spenser, so Rabindranath turned back to Kalidasa. After tea, he is to pay such homage often, glad of every chance to acknowledge so dear an allegiance. This first tribute has the impressive charm of confidence. The poet, aged 29, knows that he is India's greatest poet since Kalidasa. If the dead know of such things, the great spirit honored by this splendid tribute must have been gladdened. Rabindranath imagines the day of the rains, in far-off Ujjain, when all the author of the Gita Govinda Maturity 67 unfructuous storms of ages found consummation at last, in India's greatest lyric, that day who knows what congregated cloud, what lightning festival, what thunders loud, what maddened race of tempest gathered o'er Ujjain's proud palace crests. The dreadful roar of struggling clouds waked of 1,000 rains, the vaporous restless stirring one hidden pains of desolation wakened in one day their secret weeping. Tearing time's veil away, that day the heavy rains poured ceaselessly, as though the griefs of all eternity would soak thy mighty verses. The reader must keep his gaze on Kalidasa's poem, as Rabindranath never ceases to do for a moment. The poem is written on the first day of the rains, and in it is the fitful turbulence of the storm and swift sweeping walls of water that move across an Indian landscape. Today the sky is dark, with pouring rain, a dire wind sweeps, beneath its dreadful flail, with lifted hands the forests sow. Bee and wail, the lightning rips the clouds, it peeps and peers, hurling through empty space its crooked spears of sharp-edged laughter. In my closed dim room I read the Meghdud, on the cloudracks spume my mind, in freedom wandering far from home, is flying from land to land. The later half of the poem is a succession of fine scenes, those of the original Meghdutta, tracing that immortal cloud's passage across India. The greatest poem in Manasai is Ahalai. I do not think he ever wrote a greater, at this or at any time. He published a mutilated paraphrase in English. The poem is extraordinarily subtle, profound philosophical thought burns like a slow fire in the steady, brooding lines. It is full of gu and ses, some of which science has already proved true, and others of which it may prove true hereafter. Rabindranath's interpenetrative power 01 attains its greatest triumph. Crowning this perfection one seal. 68 Rabindranath Tagore is his tolerance, a sympathy like that of earth herself, whose maker sends his rain on the just and the unjust. This gives a glimmering beauty to that finish, where Ahilya's eyes slowly open to the dawn of a new forgiven life. The poem is representative of Rabindranath's intellectual power and range, in its strange deep crooked thought, its unification of man and nature, its sympathy with all the dim stirrings of hidden life. Ahilya, along with the god Indra, her partner in intrigue, was cursed by her husband. She became a stone till the feet of Rama touched her, restoring her to consciousness. Rabindranath recreates what one must call her mental experience in her age-long apathy. Even in rocks may be vague movements of life, and the poet feels the dumb figure remained not unknowing of earth's changes and the swift dance of the seasons. There Ahilya lay, in that hid chamber where the mother dwells, behind her paned variegated screen shut close, by tangled flowers and leafage green, her curtain never pierced by rays of morn, crowding her children's homes with wealth of corn, with life, with youth, islandly, silently. The mother here is Annapurna, the giver of nourishment, the Indian Demeter, and this passage is the first draft of one of the finest things in his volume, Chitrayi. One now, and then attains a fine effectoi dripping desolation. It resembles his cloud messenger in recalling scenes made famous by old poets. The storm has loosed its cloudy tresses, all the day is shadowed deep, and noon sends out no heat, a richer green the wood's green line possesses. My mind recalls, on such a day Aradhika the maid with love sought out her lord's retreat when I know noc, nor how far away. He sketches for us the Travel-1's wife scanning the empty path for her husband, the banished Yaksha's 11 wife and _L her grief. All sorrowful ones who have peered into a rain-swept world of storm. Evening. See Kalidasa's Meghatutta, Maturity 69, Manasai abounds in splendid pictures. The Kokil's one call, in its masterly opening, for representation of the tense tremors of noon does in verse something analogous to Wagner's fire music, with its rendering of quivering FLA1ness in sound. The piece does not forget men and women, but brings them in with rich sympathy. It ends with one of his restful pictures of the far past. That soothing sound which fills an Indian day's quietness sounded also in Sakuntala's airs, in her forest garden, as Keats's Nightingale's song found a path through the sad heart of Ruth. This he poet remembers as he looks out, and watches men and women, his own flesh and blood, busied in their toil. The bird's steady call becomes the lute of some unseen Sarasvati, a song queen beguiling with music her immortal beauty of youth, as she sits unseen among the leaves. Of the quieter pictures, none is more masterly than Expectation. All the peace of evening pervades these closely touched-in scenes. The day has gone, yet afternoon does not go. The sun, a weary picture at close of day, can nowise bring himself to go. He gazes on the earth, but would not say farewell. The day lingers, one with the clouds and fields. It lies on the tree-tops at rest. It trembles in one he waters of the stream. It stands with its long shadow spread over the bathing ghats and the pathways. Still in its tree the dove calls, sending abroad its plaintive monotone. All the dragging day it sat alone, in idle wretchedness, and even now its chant of desolation has not ceased. See, the women have gone down to the ghats, yet even now the shadows have not fallen, ripples break against their pots, and the mast's splendor flashes, while the weary wind kisses the water's edge. Now at day's end, has not she too, her blue raiment wrapping her limbs, come down to the lonely water, in the solitary flower garden wall enclosed and covered with shadow? Her garments rest carelessly on the steps in the water. Half, body one the hawk cuckoo. 70 Rabindranath Tagore and half a shadow, she casts an illusion on the water, as if the body's shadow mocked the body. The flowering mango grove sheds its rich fragrance along the bank. On a secret bough the lonely bird wails to itself. The helpless bar.u. blossom droops, and falls on the water. Day slowly finishes, and the light fades. On the horizon, the line of close dense woods looms black like a brow above a drowsy eye. But Mansi she who is embodiment has other work, the usual handful of perfect /iou go, in the mind's then pictorial. There is love lyrics, explain before make all clear before you go. The word your flute was fain to utter, oh, make plain. Nay, if there was not to say, wherefore look, and go away? And the dread, who can say if this be well? There were sun and stars in my radiant skies, today you alone are the light of my eyes. Who can say if this be well? Beauty, its myriad shapes assuming, varying bliss, fair, shining faces, ever new flowers at my door were blooming. My mind had a home in 100 places, low tiny hopes and loves abiding. Sky and earth enclosed me round. Where are they now? They are nowhere found. All that I had in you is hiding. Who can say if this be well? This trembling heart by your side would keep. Day and night I wake, and fugitive sleep no longer visits these vigilant eyes. My songs, my life, I have given away to you my all in the world today. Yet, if getting all, you go from me, unsatisfied still, then this earth, your throne, and a trice will blank and empty be, death's black frame will remain alone. Who can say if this be well? Maturity 71. In discussing his dramas Browning will be mentioned. At this time, his influence is considerable in Rabindranath's work, and in the lyric just quoted there is a hint of the writer of Escape Me. I close this consideration of the more poetical poems of Manasai with sea waves. The reader may care to compare it with the wreck of the Deutschland. Its occasion was the loss of a pilgrim ship carrying 800 passengers to Puri in 1887. All the stanzas, except the sixth, are of 11 lines. In translation, it is impossible to do more than indicate the general outline of form. 0.0. The breast of the shoreless sea destruction swings and sweeps, in dreadful festival. The indomitable wind is roaming, ungovernable in strength, beating its 1,000 wings. Sky and sea in one are reeling together in vast confusion, darkness veils the eyes of the universe. The lightning flashes and threatens, the foam fields hiss, the sharp white terrible mirth of brute nature. Eyeless, earless, houseless, loveless, the mad forces of evil rush to ruin, without direction, they have cast off all restraints. Mingling all horizons in confusion, the azure ocean grows dark, it weeps, it roars. In anger, in fear, with sobbing, with thunders and awful laughter, with maddened bellows, it brusts and foams, shatters and scatters in seethe, vainly rushes to find its shores. It is as if Vasuki, flinging down the earth, is playing, expanding his 1,000 hoods, swinging his folds as if the night has become a vast water, a swaying horror, shaking the 10 directions, tearing the web of its own curtain of sleep. The serpent who upholds the earth. 72. Rabindranath Tagore. There is neither rhythm nor meter. It is the meaningless, joyless dance of brute nature. Incarnate in 1,000 shapes, is mighty death dancing there. Water, vapor, thunder, and wind, have found blind forms of being, are vaguely pulling the nerves of their new life. Nothing they know of direction, of hindrance, or let. Afraid of themselves, they rush to ruin. See, in the Mike St. 800 men and women are staring in front of them, embracing, standing heart to heart. Lifting the ship, the storm, and ogress, shouts give. 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 The sea, one mast foam, clamours with its million upthrust arms, of. Give. Give. Wrathful at the delay, foaming and hissing, the azure death grows white with mighty anger. The tiny bark cannot bear the great weight, its iron breast will burst. Above and below have become one, they seize this tiny toy, seize it for their sport. The pilot stands in the bows. Men and women, trembling, call on God, O God. Be pitiful. Be pitiful, the anguished cry arises, save our lives, save us. Where is our familiar sun? Where noon and stars? Where our joy and trust, the lap of earth? Where are our homes, our lifelong delight? This is the malignant sport of a demon stepmother. Wherever we look, we see nothing familiar, nothing of our own, only 1,000 dreadful faces, 1,000 dreadful forms. 0 God, thou art not. Pity is not. Life is not. There is only the sport of nature. Seeing the terror, the infant is frightened, and screams, and wails, the piteous cry is stilled in a moment. Maturity in the twinkling of an eye it ended. None could see when life was, and when life finished. It was as if in one gust 100 lamps went out in unison. In 1,000 homes happiness was suddenly quenched. This brute madness knows not others' anguish. Knows not itself. Why in its midst was the mind of man placed, so loving, so weighed with suffering? Why is the mother here? And the infant who looks in her face? Why does brother clasp brother, and fall on his breast? In the sweet rays of the sun, in how much affection they played together, sharing what joy, what sorrow. Why do tears tremble in their eyes? 10 Piteous hope. Terrified love shakes like the flame of a lamp. Dandled on such a lap of tempest, how can men rock fearless? Why has not the demon death devoured all hope, all happiness? The mother leaps to destruction. Why to her breast does she still clasp her child? 7J She runs to meet death. Yet even there she will not surrender it. Convulsively she clutches her heart's wealth. On the one side stand arrayed sea and sky, on the other stands a woman. Who shall separate her help's infant from her? Whence gained she such strength? See how the child of her breast she holds to her. In the cruel stream of brute nature, into the heart of man whence came such love? This mother love, which never knows despair, which will not acknowledge peril, eternally new with draughts of the nectar of life, that nook of the universe which, though but for a moment, has known it can that itself be without the yearnings of a mother, into the heart of the storm in the weak breast of a mother, has come love that conquers death. Else there no fullness of love which has wakened this love? 74 Rabindranath Tagore Jostling together, in the one place, our mercy and mercilessness are a corroding doubt. Mighty distrust, mighty hope, are comrades. They have built their nests together. Which is the true, which the false? This questioning day and night man's heart agitates, now exalting, now dashing down. The strength of the storm devil strikes it, yet it ignores anguish. Love comes, and draws to the breast, banishing all fear. Of two gods is this the eternal double sport, breaking and building? Ever unendingly, victory ever, and ever defeat? This is the grandest sea storm he ever did. There is wonderful sea music and imagery here, the very sweep.ind rush of the tempest. In the opening stanzas, the lines swell up and crash like waves, and the black clouds and fierce winds are living things, blotting all hope and light. No translation can ever suggest the sound and surge of stanzas in which a great poet, with his imagination tense and creative, uses to the full all the onomatopoeic wealth of even Bengali. The climax is reached in the great lines of the fourth stanza, where the storm fiends clamor savagely, "Give! Give! Give!" and the baffled sea grows white with rage. The fifth stanza drops somewhat, by a rhetorical device too common in his work, the asking of second-rate or useless questions. I submit that the reflective part of this poem is below the descriptive. I am not blind to the grandeur of the vision of human love, defiant in its impotence and raising its keys separate in the very teeth of the triumphant cruelty of nature. But the poet has succeeded so completely in putting before us the appalling situation that all comment is felt as an irrelevance. We want no expression for our distress. The poem is magnificent, both in imaginative presentation and in pity, and no stanza is without unforgettable touches. The 100 lives going out like 100 wicks in one sudden rush of wind, love trembling like the flame of a lamp, 8 poems on social problems. If we read only such poems as Sea Waves and Expectation, we should form a very untrue conception of his mind at this time. I have reserved, for consideration in this chapter, the political and social poems of Mansi. Social abuses had already drawn him into controversy, and a tractate on Hindu marriage, in 1887, aroused great anger. During his Ghazipur sojourn he was watching the world closely. Me.N. ACI, as a result, contains a remarkable group of poems which are fiercely concerned with the political and social thought of Bengal. No poet has ever written more ferociously of his own people, and it is no marvel that the music hall patriot, who is as common in Jaindia as anywhere else, received a shock. Rabindranath's independence of thought and attitude constitute not his least claim to a place among great men and great poets. The circumstances of the time made his attitude the more courageous. The first criticisms of Hindu customs, those made by Ram Mohan Roy and Desrosiers' school, had died down. The counter-movement in religion led by the poet's own father had checked foreign influence, especially Christian influence. A vigorous national literature had followed, and had fostered 2 strong, indeed passionate, schools of thought. One was patriotic, the other was a sweeping revival of old Hinduism and an organized and elaborate defense of it. National pride had been encouraged by the new theories which ascribed an Aryan source to European civilization, and a remarkable man called Susdarti Archachuromani was teaching that Hindu superstitions and customs were subtle expressions of the profoundest scientific knowledge. Thus, the tiki or tuft of hair worn by Orthodox Hindus had a purpose, for had we not rediscovered what the ancient Hindus must have 75-76 Rabindranath Tagore known all the time, that hair was highly charged with electricity? Europe had a superiority in brute force, in crude materialism. But its thought and religion, its languages, yes, and its science, so Pundit Susdar now showed, were borrowed from India. Bankim Chatterjee once persuaded Rabindranath to listen to this interpreter of ancient times. He went doubtfully, and listened in utter amazement. There is no one in all the world with whom it is so difficult to sympathize as with the narrower fanatics of our own particular faith. 1. There was no hesitation about the stand he took. He who had been for a decade recognized as the most eminent of the younger literary men confronted his own friends and people. He was unpatriotic, he criticized his own ocean, instead of arousing loud cheers by attacking other nations. He proved himself a bad Aryan, exposing what seemed to him the evils of his own civilization. The courage he displayed throughout his 101g public career has never been adequately recognized. This courage found striking manifestation in Mansi. One of his countrymen has observed to me that his criticism of the mild Bengali is sometimes almost savage. There is no almost about it. Wild Hopes, the best of this early group of political piece, unlike most of them, is poetry as well as biting satire. His scorn has wings, has sweep and vigor. When mad hopes hiss like a snake in the breast, with vain rage stamping in the bonds of fair, let us compose ourselves, with great care set the hookahs out, shuffle the filthy cards vigorously, and sit down to play. Let us huddle together on a bed, a dozen of us at a time, the rice-eating milk-drinking race of Bengals. The lash plies mercilessly for another stanza, then comes the outburst, rather than this, 0 that I might be an Arab Bedouin. Beneath my feet the boundless desert, melting into the horizon. My horse gallops, the sand flies. Pouring my stream of life into the sky, day and night I go with fire burning in my heart. My spar in my hand, courage in my heart, always homeless. Free of restraint as the desert wind in its Lord Morley, Miscellanies L. p. 48. Poems on Social Problems 77. Blowing. My blood swells as I leap into peril. Life tingles throughout my whole body, my whole mind. He returns to the contrast, which is close beside him, with face smile wreathed in happiness of slavery, with PMS obsequiously joined, let your body writhe at your master's foot, in ecstasy at his caress. Rolling before his shoes, pick up bread buttered with contempt, fill your fist greedily and go home. There sit and brag of your ancestors, brag that the whole world trembles with dread of the Aryan might and pride. The theme of Wild Hopes is elaborated with bitter seria in improving our control. He cheers on the heroes whose battle is oratory and journalism. Come on, fill up your quires of paper. That is the way to learn to fight. Always keep pen and ink handy. Heroes of Bengal satirizes the lazy, pampered student, spectacled and lolling Agim Thr, who knows all about Western history and chatters boatifully. In a side room of the house Bolubabu is memorizing multiplication tables in a loud voice. We two brothers are leaning AGA1 NST Adia 1 in great bliss, with a history in our hand. On the table a Kuroene lamp is burning. We have read 3 chapters. Diety I is an MA, IABA. As we read, the oil gets used up. Wisdom sprouts in our brains, as we learn he and the hero Cromwell tumbled L11's king's head down, as a boy with the blow of a stick sends ripe mangoes flying. They read further, the R2 students, how some gave up their lives for really Ion's sake, some for the sake of others, some perished in Baltalit is all printed in the book. We read all this, lolling blissfully against the chair. How knowledge grows, We read. From reading the students pass to discussion. In what respect are we inferior to the English? It is a great error one to say that we are inferior to them. We differ merely in manners, customs, and outward appearance. We can learn whatever they write, and we elder bro one her. 78 Rabindranath Tagore can write it again in Bengali. Max Muller has said that we are Aryans. Hearing that word, we have given up all solid work and have decided that we are great people, as we lie back in ease. They have read of Marathon and Thermopylae, and their blood burns as they imagine themselves doing these heroic deeds. Then, with a yawn, zero, chuck the Battle of Naseby. Cromwell, you are immortal. However, let's stop here, my head's aching, my mind's fagged. Where's that maid gone? Here, fetch some sago. Zero, come in, Nanny Babu. Come in, come in. Let's have the cards out, and I'll give you your revenge for yesterday. Dharma Prachar or Preaching Religion. A Bengali friend suggests mission work as a title was written in 188 feet 8 inches, after a cowardly assault by young Aryans on a Salvationist. At that time, the Salvation Army adopted not only Indian standards of life, but the dress of sannyasis. The policy was later modified. While it lasted, it cost many generous lives, needlessly sacrificed. Yet, after this poem, the army may well feel that the deaths were not in vain, and that at least one Indian was brought to see the reality of the religion which called them forth. The poem flames with contempt, so unutterable that it uses an almost comic meter, expressing itself in snatches of bitter laughter. Listen, brother Baisu. Victory to Yesu. We, the Aryan race, shall we hear that name? Vishnu to our aid. Let the plague be stayed. If they call on Jesus, gone is India's fame. Every saint and sage weeps and dies in rage. Where's our mighty karma? Where the eternal dharma? Rumor of our Vedas surely late we heard? Brothers, cease to drowse. Anger's fires arouse. Aryans to the risk. Save the sacred word. Tuck your shirts up. Quick. Each man, get a stick. Up with Hinduism. Down the Christian's creed. Beja gone? Too bad. He's the very lad. These terms are too familiar to call for explanation. Poems on social problems pious. With him we were a host indeed. Mano, Buddho, haste. Get your shoes laced. If we find a chance, we'll kick that padre swine. Clap. Then insult ball. If he's calm through all, let a score, or more, Bengali lads combine. Trip him, push him flat. I'll snatch his hat half a dozen then down him in the scuffle. Whip your scissors out, slash his hair about, wrench his buttons off, snip his clothes, and ruffle. Gird your loins up, clench your fists. Be very strong. Don't forget your sticks, boys. Hurry. Come along. The captain sings and hisses. How shall I assuage heart that is afire? How express my rage? 179, exeunt all, girding up their loin, la this in hand, exeunt with great valor. Scene 2. Baisu, Haru, Mano, Buddho, and the rest assemble. In the saffron robe of an ascetic, with bare feet, enter a preacher of the Salvation Army. The preacher. Blessed be thy love, blessed be thy name. Build thy kingdom, Lord, the new Jerusalem, one from thy world let hatred, rage, and malice go. Wipe the mourner's eyes, banish death, and woe. O souls athirst thou, living water give. Loving Jesus, in thy grace let sinners live. The captain of the band. That's the fellow, Baisu. But where are his shoes? He's English, right enough. But how my fears I lose, at sight of such a dress. The preacher. Lord, these cruel, cold, loveless hearts of ours with thy great love enfold. I am helpless, weak one a snatch of a vulgar love song. Clubs. Jerusalem and name rhyme in the Bengali. 80 Rabindranath Tagore the Patriot Band. The name of Krishna shout, chuck your talk of Christ. Quick, friend L right about. Let us see your back. If you stop, you'll call Bari Krishna. Come. Hurry, hurry, ball. The preacher. Since thou hast borne it, Lord, all pain and loss thy slave can bear. I take thy heavy cross, bravo, bravo, friend. Send grief and pain, and with my tears wipe out some sinner's stain. Life for their life I'll give at thy command, dear Lord, I left my friends and native land. All th1t I loved for thy great love I left, of comradeship, of woman's love bereft comfort and sweet society forsook, when thy dear vow upon my head L took. Not yet forgotten, still at whiles they wake, and old ties draw me homeward for their sake. Yet, if I once gaze on thy blood-stained face, before that love, of alien land or race all thought is killed, there I know mine or theirs. This foolish heart, with all its silly cares, Lord, let thy love shut round. These who have come with poison, send them hence with nectar home. Their sinful hearts draw to thy heart to arise, light of God's love. Shine on these hate-filled eyes. The Patriot Band. I can stand no more. My Aryan blood's ablaze. Haru, Madhu, beat him. Boys, r/Athos raise. If you'd save your skin, Krishna's name proclaim. The preacher. Gracious Jesus Christ, blessed be thy name. The Patriot Band. Gird your loins up. Hit him. Knock the Christian down. Protect our Hindu faith, our Aryan land's renown. They beat the preacher on the head. His head bursts, and blood runs wiping away the blood. He says, my master give you peace, his grace I forward I am but his poor slave, he the world's Lord. A name of Vishnu, Yeshua I applied to Krishna. Poems on social problems. The Patriot Band, very excited. Goodness. Cebu. Haru. Look out, Nanny. Charu. 'Tis no time for fooling. Have you got no fear? The police are coming. I can see them near, brandishing their batons. Run like streaks of flame. Blessed be the Aryan faith. Blessed Krishna's name. They go very hastily. 81 As a picture of concentrated caddishness, this is unrivaled. The caution of the patriots till they are certain that the preacher one man against many is not going to attempt to defend himself, their sudden access of courage on seeing the very things which should have won their respect, his bare feet and saffron garb, their land's time-honored signs of dedication and meekness, their rapid flight, all this, in the first edition, has an even more savage crowning stroke. They arrive home, full of shouting brag at their great victory, and in their anger because food is not immediately ready for their Aryan greatnesses they beat and kick wives who so little know how to serve such hero husbands. In later editions, the poet remitted this part of the castigation. Dharma Prachir is noteworthy for its sympathetic presentment both of the missionary and of the religion he teaches. After the English Gitanjali was published, there was much discussion of the supposed influence of Christianity on his work. In my opinion, the direct influence was very slight, and his attitude towards Christian doctrine was hardly friendly. He seems to have made no direct study of the New Testament. Dharma Prachar is almost alone in its understanding treatment of teaching in which he does not share belief. A magistrate prescribed the poem, when it first appeared, as seditious, and likely to bring the government into contempt. But his most flaming anger is reserved for child marriage. Deserted is a dignified remonstrance to one who has turned to lead reaction, after teaching lofty doctrine, and who now mocks at what he had introduced. It contains these terrible words, 682 Rabindranath Tagore playing our flutes, let us bring home a bride of 8 years. Let us snatch and tear open the bud of childhood, let us force out the sweat of youth. Pressing a weight of scriptures on the new expanding life, let us make it one with the dust of the wrinkled ages. But, the poem proudly insists, reaction is sure of failure. For the lost leader, well, your own teaching will save us from these words of yours. Loving conversation of a newlywed Bengali couple is a further contemptuous commentary on this wedding of age and babyhood. Scene I, the bedroom, the first NGLLL. The husband. Where can any blee be found like ours, in this first meeting, of life with life? Corn, forgetting everything else, today let us two simply gaze at each other. Our hearts have come together in one place, full of bashfulness and mode tie. It is as if in one fascination we two have forgotten ourselves, and are sucking honey from one flower. My heart, burning in the fires of loneliness all life long, has become cinders. I have come to refresh myself in the horror sea of your love. Say but once. I am yours, and except you I desire nothing else. But what is this? Why do you rise to leave me? Where are you going, sweetheart? The bride, weeping. I am going to sleep with my nurse. The enamored husband tries again, 2 days later. With high-flown phrases of worship, he asks his girl wife why she is weeping in a corner. She replies, I left my PMSY mini at home. Another day passes, and he finds her in the inner garden, to his wasted raptures whose name are the restless bees humming. With eyes full of laughter, your mind happily agitated with joyous memories, in this lonely grove, this bowery shelter, what are you doing? She says, I am eating wild plums. He says he has come to serve her, and asks how he can do this. She asks for another handful of plums. In his courtliest strain of extravagance, he announces that he is going, and he wonders how she will beguile the heavy sorrow of his absence. She says, I will play at marriage with my dolls. Poems on Social Problems 83. These poems showed extraordinary courage and made a deep impression. Some of our admiration must be given also to his own nation, who allowed such frankness of criticism. Indians are as capable of ruthless examination of the faults of their own civilization as Europeans and Americans are. This has been shown by very many, from the time of Ram Mohan Roy to that of Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru. It is one sign of greatness when a nation produces outstanding men and women, but it is an even greater sign when it shows willingness to listen to blame as well as praise. But Rabindranath's contribution to the positive side of the problem does not take us far as yet, if such poems as A Woman to a Ma 11 and the Man's Reply give high, own solution. Marriage is represented as having reached a stage where the husband takes the wife for granted. She is weeping and unsatisfied. She remembers the time when her presence thrilled and intoxicated, now she is altered. Kindness. Her husband is bewildered at her refusal to be satisfied with it. Why my heart is brc.iking, why I weep even yelkanim, not melkertand. Will much talking tell you /no, I wipe my eyes. El Heskar tears and not reproach you. Tears. The man's reply has an appearance of reasonableness so far as everything except the disappointment of the woman's heart is concerned. He points out that at first they had known nothing about themselves, about each other, or about what life was going to mean. Each had intoxicated the other, and all questionings had been put by. Slowly then came joy's satiety, underneath the flowery shade we stirred enchantment's lake, its lotus tearing even mud is pliant, in the guise of play. He insists that even now sometimes the old ecstasy wakens, and he comes to her with flaming heart, but he finds his goddess weeping also the message of the spring moonlight 84 Rabindranath Tagore and the south wind shrivels, and he grows cold again. H. He concludes by advising acceptance of what is possible, let us two share joy and grief together enough of offering flowers to a goddess. These two poems are regarded as remarkable, and they certainly struck a new note in Bengali literature. I have never been convinced that in them the poet meant to do more than set out two sides, without passing a judgment on either. Yet in the second poem's conclusion one cannot quite escape the suspicion that he is still far from understanding or sharing what the best modern thought feels passionately about the ideal relationship between man and woman. IQ1 Jot, a criticism which has been given me, and with which I associate myself. Woman's attraction in the first phase is represented as merely physical. It is two bodies that attract each other, not two souls. One here is no flashing sympathy, no understanding, no subtle alliance. Lacking these, love is mud, for the bodily love does not come as the irresistible climax of spiritual union and of all the electric forces of two interplaned spiral. That is possible only where MCRS and women's minds are kfu, l. of other interests than sex, where a man and woman turn to each other because of subtle ties in these interests and in their own complex characters. It happens only when there is the possibility of being understood fully by someone else, of having one's nature in its depths of blind emotion, in its hints and suggestions of mystery, in its haunting elusiveness developed and strengthened and made clear and powerful by the love of another character. As subtle and complex, and sympathetic to the point of oneness. This gives adventure to what otherwise is dull, is even mud. When a woman's love is obtained so easily, as a mere matter of arrangement, you will have such poems as A Woman Ro a Man and the Ma 11, RTPLY regarded as daring and new. It will be remembered that his address on Hindu Maratag was delivered in 1887, the year of the earliest poems of Manasai. 40 years later, Bengali novels were still monotonous with their one theme, the marriage system, and the social play, obsessed with it, were as dull as European and American thrilling cinema stories of passion. The sooner the question is settled, the better for literature. It will be interesting to poems on social problems. 85. See what the New India of 1950 says of the fiction of 1900 to 1925, it has patience to read it at all. One reason for the C-team-parative failure of Rabindranath's short stories in Europe and America is, I think, the presence among them of a few whose heroes are mawkish and unmanly. This, even more than the inequality of the stories, has lost him readers, and has caused the excellence of the best stories to be overlooked. It is a fault which he shares, so far as it is his, with very many other writers. Why do so many Bengali novelists fail to win sympathy for their men characters? Their women are often wonderfully good. In fairness, we must remember that men merely accepted the fullest service from women as their right, in Europe as well as Asia. Consider, for example, the perfect cattishness of Prince Geraint, in the Two Idols of the King in which he appears. Some of the fierce contempt which he arouses the reader cannot help transferring to an age which found him admirable. Neither Rabindranath nor Tennyson could altogether escape from their own time. They dealt with men as they found them, as often noble yet also often spoiled and complacent. Rabindranath, at any rate, as I have shown, was nearly always far in advance of his time and people. The devotion of Alcestis. Assuredly the heroic unselfishness of woman is a beautiful thing, and I warrant you that, the gods helping me, Alcestis shall take no injury from my hands. But what of Admetus as a husband? That is an aspect of the matter upon which our hymnists and our congregations are little disposed to dwell, and they find no difficulty in ignoring it. It belongs to the skimble-scamble thinking which aids, and I5 aided by faith in these monstrosities, never to see anything steadily, never to see anything whole, but only such parts as please. And your heroic tragedy is beloved for flattering this habit. But there are flatterers enough. And for my part, I intend to give you much more of Admetus than of Alcestis. He is much better for you. You are accustomed to rest with complacency on the picture of the self-sacrificing woman as the ideal of wives. For herself she deserves such admiration, but for men and society, no. I should like to make you feel, and mean to try, what a blind, barbarous, self-defeating selfishness is at 86. Rabindranath Tagore. The bottom of all this rapture about the devotion of women. You wilt say that the women join in it. But what sort of women? Our magnanimous satirists have no difficulty in directing the almost unanimous resentment of the sex against whoever dares to see and show what mischief to themselves and to us results from their ill-governed virtue, not less than from their ungoverned vice. I pity Alcestis, and I pity her husband. What would she make of him? What does she make of him? 9. First DRDMAS of maturity AFRNRMNASI, Rabindranath turned again to drama, writing a series OT tragedies, broken by one superb romantic play in Chitrayanjati I and one prose comedy, Vaikunth's manuscript. The latter, the finti of his social comedies, appeared in 1891. Its dialogue is very witty, swift, and brief, a rollicking delightful thing. Nothing could be more Jake his previous dramas. BNT its excellence could not survive translation. The series of tragedies opened with King and Queen and Sacrilege CE, which have both been translated by the poet. Of all his dramas, King CJND Quem is that in which he has taken the greatest liberties in translation. There is singularly little correspondence between the original and the Engelbeit Versio 11, even the one or two main lines which have been kept, out of a very complex drama, being very freely handled and changed. All the abundant subplots have been omitted, much talk between the king and his queen, showing the situation's development, talk between the queen and the minister who reveals to her the extent to which her family are draining the country, dull talk between villagers, talk among the evil ERS of the queen's family who play a far more prominent part in the 11 original than in the translation, talk between spies and plotters. Talk between the king and queen of Kashmir, talk between the fugitive Kumra Sen and the Raja of Trikur, who refuses to shelter him. All this has gone. We lose by the omission of beautiful scenes which show us more fully the queen's character and the love between her brother and herself, and which give us a very charming picture of Isla and her love for Kumra Sen. The poet has made his usual additions in translations. This, for example, is in the English only, 87 Rabindranath Tagore only. For a moment, she checked her horse and turned her face to the temple, bowing her head low, then rode away fast as lightning llg. I cannot say if she had tears in her eyes. The light from the temple was dim. The most notable thing in King and Queen is what has been an outstanding feature of his work, its greater success in delineating women than men. Isla is a very lovely figure, though paling out into shadow at the close, and never free from 11 ebulosity, a nymph seen through the fountain spray of sorrow. Her beauty, her loyalty, and gentleness, these are seen. Her filmy evanishment is part of the play's scattered finish in a mixture of melodrama and fine tragedy, of carelessness and subtle art, as disordered a close as ever a good poet gave. A second female 11 Gur has drawn Rabindranath's still deeper sympathies, those sympathies which go out to women's loneliness, their great sufferings and passion. Queen Sumitra, so rarely seen yet so pervading, flashes through the tale, a queen from her noble putting by of a love which is merely selfish play and her swift riding from it, to her death. Ibsen's influence has been considerable on the younger school of Bengali writers. I cannot say if Rabindranath, in these earlier days, had read A Doll's House, but the resemblance between Nora and Sumitra is striking, and, I should guess, not accidental. His preoccupation with the question of marriage, so marked in Mona C, here shows on a wider field. The husband, by being lover only, has lost the wife's respect, and the callous brutality with which he vindicates his manhood, when she has fled, only loses her completely. The play's sarcasm is bitter. The greedy horde of foreign officials battens on a starved land. Nothing. It is merely hunger, the vulgar horde of poverty. One, he smiles sweetly, strokes the land on its back with his caressing hand, and whatever comes to his touch gathers with care. It will be at once grasped that the play has a double meaning. These quotations are from the poet's own translation, Sacrifice and Other Plays. First Dramas of Maturity 89 Political reference, which helps to explain its very considerable measure of popularity on the stage. The minister's reply to the king's demand that his generals turn the aliens out. Our general himself is a foreigner. This, repeated by the king himself, is almost the burden of the play. Later, the king of Kashmir indignantly repudiates the suggestion that his son came before Bikram's courts, to be condemned or forgiven by a foreigner. Non-cooperation is here in the germ, a generation before Mr. Gandhi launched it. The coloring is sober, though it has glowing moments. Of King and Queer, as of his other plays, it must be said that it is a vehicle for ideas. In Rabindranath's dramas, the reacher of thought often strangles the action. Yet it is not true that his plays are not genuine drama. The drama is concentrated, living in the hearts and thoughts and words of a very few characters, sometimes one or two only. There is little differentiation of character. All the actors are pitiful at heart, lineal children of the poet who created them. I have mentioned Ibsen. Bikram, in his self-deception and his ready unquestioning acceptance of the reputation which has been invented for him by others, is strangely like an Ibsen character. He wins battles, yet loses the only campaign which matters. Garland after garland, as he grasps it, crumb, to dust in his hot fingers. His shadowy beaten adversary waxes greater and greater, and wins all that the world contains worth winning. Yet the finish, which comes so near a fine success, falls short because the poet has failed to draw the king consistently. In the end, he shows himself as like his queen, and one wonders why the action should have taken place at all. King and Queen shall have been Rabindranath's greatest drama, for the theme has rich possibilities. His English version, as so often for it is critical maturity that in his translations is working over again the output of his creative youth, shows an awareness of the fact that he squandered his chances of success, and let the drama sprawl and trail through a jungle of undramatic and only underily relevant matter. 90 Rabindranath Tagore. There is a great deal of merely illustrative dialogue, parts that are just so much stage scenery or prologue stuff. The theme cries out for concentration. Had 1T received the rig 1T handling, it would have stood out far above Sacrifice, for the characters of both the king and queen show unexpected powers of analysis. That the reader may judge how mixed is the play's finish, I translate it. The sameness of style in the published English version inevitably hides the sternness of Sumitra's irony and defiance, as it does every other quality but soft beauty. Kumra Sen, seeing his subject's sufferings in his brother-in-law's pursuit of him, has sent his head by his sister's hands to Bikram. The drama has been the vehicle for Rabindranath's scorn of governments, their wars and glory, and this flames up now at the end. Kumarsen's arrival is announced, and the tyrant prepares to be magnanimous, Bikram, coming forward. Come, come, my friend, come. S11111 Itra comes 011T from the Pala 11Q11 I11, carrying K11 Mar E11's head 011 a golden plate. Bikram. Sumitra. Sumitra. Chandrasen. Ah mother, what is this? Sumitra. Sumitra, he in whose wake you are aged night and day, through forests, tumbled rocks, and scattered wilds, your realm, religion, mercy sacrificed, all, even the kingdom's guardian goddess, slighted he in whose quest you filled with lamentation all ways that are, whose head you sought to buy take. Him, great king. This head receive, the noblest of all the kingly kindreds of the world. With his own hand the prince dispatched this gift, guest offering for his guest. Your mind's desire is satisfied, now be quieted. Be quieted in this life, and let it fly to flaming hell forthwith. Be happy, you. In the poet's own translation, this is veiled. There is no veil in the original. One he goddess Kali. The desire. First dramas of maturity, shouting, merciful queen, the world's life-giver. Mother. Give place upon your lap. She falls dead. Isla enters, run 11 I11G. Isla. Oh, what is this, great king? My prince, she swoons. Shankar, coming forward. My lord, my chief, my child. Then my own soul more dear, of this old heart life's treasure. This was well. Oh, this was well. Thou hast put on thy crown, and like a king hast come unto thy throne. Dath's shining mark has lit thy brow with everlasting glory. To see today thy splendor God preserved this aged one so long. Thou hast gone home to virtue's dwelling place. through all births thy slave, go with thee. Cha 11. Raisin, flinging his crown from his head. Cursed be this crown. Curse this throne. Kicking the throne. Abadi enters. Ogress and vampire, hence. Hence. Never show thy face to me again. Vile fiend. Rebate. This passion will not last forever. L.Z. Bikram. Kneeling by S1111 Itra's body. Goddess, I was not worthy of thy love. Wouldst thou not pardon therefore? Hast tlh Jugan, holding me fast in guilt for evermore? I would have begged thy pardon in this life, with tears incis 5 ant. Tlat thou ta and the chance? Thou, like a god, wast stern, immovably. Not vain thy punishment, and sentence hard. 91 This is melodramatic, and badly melodramatic. But so often is the Elizabethan drama, which was the Indian poet's model. But the passage attains also in some of its lines the Elizabethan passion and burning rhetoric. The theme of sacrifice had been implicit in many an obscure page of Indian religious thought. But Rabindranath's play first gave its protest a reasoned and deliberate place in art. He attacks bigotry with the weapon most dangerous to 92 Rabindranath Tagore, the sarcasm of parody. He puts into Raghupti's mouth that specious argument, that time is ever slaying, nature is red in tooth and claw, and therefore the mind that made the universe calls on us to offer up an orgy of butchery. Many must have applauded Raghupti's words, only to feel a dawning discoict after. Conviction flares in Govinda's words, sin hollow ripen to its ugly fullness before it bursts and dies hideously. When king's blood is shed by a brother's hand, then lust for blood will disclose its devil's face, leaving its disguise of goddess. The tragedy of questioning grows. Goddess, is there any little thing, that yet remains out of the wreck of thee? If there be but a faintest spark of thy light in the remotest of the stars of evening, answer my cry, though thy voice be F the feeblest. Say to me, child, here I am. No, she is nowhere. She is not. But take pity upon J5ing, O illusion, and for him become true. Art thou so irredeemably false, that not even my love can send the slightest tremor of life through thy nothingness? Zero fool, for whom have you upturned your cup of life, emptying it to the last drop? For this unanswering void truthless, merciless, and motherless. Again, let us be fearlessly godless, and come closer to each other, they want our blood. And for this day have come down to the dust of our earth, leaving their magnificence of heaven. For in their heaven there are no men, no creatures who can suffer. This note of wild arraignment takes us beyond Ram Mohan Roy. A wind of the modern world wails through this desolation. The desolation deepens, till the anguish attains its fierce. By laying hold of the untamable spirit of Raghupti, prisoner, and brought before the king for doom. The king's dignity stands up in quiet power, as when he says, to his brother's plea for pardon. The judge is still more bound by his laws than his prisoner. After that brother's banishment, king and kingly regal face each other, spirit to naked spirit. Even in translation, the page trembles with passion. In Raghupti's proud stormy I use the poet's own translation. First Dramas of Maturity 93 Okuds. His bitterness almost slays him, as he realizes the importance of the idol he has served to his ruin. Okay, how she stands there, the Sidwai stone dead, dumb, blind, the whole sorrowful world weeping at her door, the noblest hearts reciting themselves at her stony feet. Aghast at the permitted pain, the disciple who was as his son dead by his own folly, own life in ruin beneath the rebellion he has raised, Raghupti learns with utter bitterness the impotence of that pitiless name which he has worshipped. But the beggar girl, whose pet goat had been taken for Kali's service, brings to him, as to the sannyasi in Mira's revenge, the perception of what remains, better than our hopes, the wharf sanctities of human love. The goddess he has done with, has hurled her image away. But this child comes to call him father. And the pair go out together. His early plays reached their highest dramatic point in Sacrifice. It is worthwhile to consider the play a little further from the side of drama. Its technique is very faulty. His translation, as usually, can amalgamate different scenes, omitting long intermediate passages, not only without loss but with great gain. The Shakespearean drama has bequeathed some conventions of very doubtful vac, which Rabindranath took over. Thus, Sacrifice has two underplots, both of which the poet ha omitted from his English version. One underplot is talk of villagers, and is supposed to supply the humor and comic relief that tragedy is held to require. Bucolic chatter can be very dull. The other underplot introduces a new motive, the Queen's desire to remove Dhruva, the king's adopted son. This might have been built mo5t powerfully into the plot. But it comes far too late, more than halfway through, is made little of and led very half-heartedly. And such a motive, so powerful, if at all genuine, is not suited for a secondary part. But the chief fault of Sacrifice is excessive declamation. A great deal of this the poet's maturer judgment evidently condemned, for it disappears from the English. 94 Rabindranath Tagore, the characters in Sacrifice are irresponsible, waifs swayed by the strong wind of their creator's emotion, puppets in the grip of a fiercely felt idea. Aparna, the beggar girl, on whose deeds the whole plot turns, does not interest. A friend objects to this, she is in the background all the time, and in the original she is a lovely creation. This does not seem to me true. If we are referred to Pippa Passes, the answer is that Browning's poem is a string of episodes, and not connected drama. Pippa is hardly an actor, she is a symbol, and kept in a symbol's position. It is not so with Aparna. She is not in the background. Then, the conversions are not worked out psychologically, in the case of either Jayang or Raghupti. Artigapati lived on the stage when the Rohit impersonated H. I'm, and he lives in the play precisely because he is the poet. In As You Licked It, or he reluctantly forgives the usurping duke's conversion. But then, the T is a comedy, and its title, As You Like It? Raghupti's change, which I a later edition, no part of the first edition is sudden and unreasonable. The play's finish is sketchy, hastily Compere said, if the poet invention were flagging and so dropped abruptly to a foreordained conclusion. Yet Sacrifice has not only value C as emotion and poetry, it has stage qualities, and can be made popular. Under the pressure of Raghupti's distress for Jaisingha, it shakes itself free from all declamation, and I altogether fine. This was felt on the Calcutta stage, when the poet himself acted the part of Raghupti. It was generally conceded Creel his greatest success as an actor. One how moving he could be a five, an actor only this generation can realize. I can only assure those who will follow us, vidi clocentum. Credite, posteri. 1 Mahila nobis. 10 residents at Shilada. After the Ghazipur experiment palled, the poet planned to tour India on the Grand Trunk Road, by the leisurely medium of a bullock cart. He guarded his genius as watchfully as Milton. His plan would have brought the pageant of India's varied peoples before him, unfolded richly and slowly, as he made his way from Bolpur to Peshawar. But the Maharshi had also been thinking and planning. At that time the Tagore estates were very much larger than they are now. They were chiefly in 3 districts, at Chilsida, on the Ganges, in Orissa, and at Kaligram, in the Rajshahi district. Rabi D. Ranatha's elder brother Jyotirindranath, a fiery nationalist, had been running 11G, a line of steamers for inland navigation, and had lost everything in competition with European firms. He was compelled to withdraw from business, and to relinquish all control over the family Tates. Dwayendrath, the eldest brother, well, he is a philosopher, and we had discovered that it was useless to expect him to look after things. One for a while, the estates // in charge of nephews, but the Maharshi from time to time such TCD that Rabindranath should take over affairs, and at la, T became, seriously enraged. "This isn't my BWI1CS, he said. "The property is Uppertring you brothers, and I am not going to be bothered with it." When he heard of the projected Biloxi IRT tour, he refused to be put off any longer. Ajit Chakravarti's friendly jibe is that at LLNT the poet was just a little frightened by the name of work, but at last he consented. He proved himself a very capable manager, at a time when the estate had been doing MTO a bad way. He knew Shailyada well already, one of high, early one conversation. Rabindranath, p. 31. 95-96 Rabindranath Tagore Recollections was at Jyotirindra when and a leopard. 9 years of age accompany LG shooting there, and seeing both a tiger, there was a short break in his new duties. In 189 IW.N he revisited England, reaching London on the 10th of September, he was back in India on the 81th of November. Siadmi had been started just before he left India, and in its pages he published A Pilgrim to Europe, a charmingly written diary. The visit did him no good, and did nothing to allay his restlessness or to attract him to the English people. On return, he took up the Zamindari work again. He now entered upon his happiest and most creative period, one iving chiefly at Shailyada. Shailyada is on the Pjdma, Lotus, the undivided Ganges before it joins the Brahmaputra and acts into 1,000 mighty waterways. It is not a widely scattered Zamindari, but sufficiently scattered to entail a certain amount of leisurely travelling by boat. It is within easy reach of Calcutta, and it gave him the rest of mind and leisure which ripened his many-sided powers. He frequently visited Kaligram, going by canal and the river, and the Orissa estates, by train to Calcutta and by canal boat onwards. He must have spent most of his time on the water. And he learned to feel for the Ganges even more than the Hindus love, for he knew her moods intimately. During these years, he was a giant, reaping his wealthy fields. Drama, every sort of poem, short story, satire, essay, abundant private correspondence, these were the criticism, sheaves he gathered. Much of all this does not deserve to perish. But at first, at any rate, he did not gather his most enduring lords. For these early days of freedom beside the great stream which is the very heart-blood of his land were stormy with sea controversy. As has been said in an earlier chapter, this was the time of the rise of Neo-Hinduism, which read into the ancient Hindu scriptures a knowledge of modern science and explained the crudest superstitions in a pseudo-scientific fashion. Its organ was the Navajiban, or new residence at Shoyliden 97 life, castigated by Dr. Seal, in his vigorous youth, one as this hybrid literature of impotence, this great sink of national imbecility, whose characteristics he finds to be a hopeless stetility, a blank, stunned stare, an incongruous mysticism, a jellyfish structure of brain and heart, and its motto abandon hope, all ye who enter here. Of its attempted reconciliation of the wildest mythology with modern science, he makes the comparison with the senseless maunderings of some Hebracing Camber Britons over the unintelligible and uncouth remains of Stonehenge. Baba Bunkim Chandra Chatterjee is its head of gold, Babus Chandranath Bose and Lakshay Chandra Sarkar are the silver breast and arms, a Bengali journalist furnishes the brass, and the rank and file of the great army of indolent lives to routine from feet of clay. This is refreshing decision, and, indeed, the polemics of the period furnish exhilarating reading. Rabindranath joyed in the Asar. In letters to Bankim, some years earlier, he had criticized the latter's life of Krishna. This of itself might not have strained matters to breaking point.